Hello and welcome to the Her Hoop Stats podcast. I'm Gabe Ibrahim, and we got a special presentation, second year in a row, that I've got Richard Cohen and Kevin Pelton with me. Kevin, wait, which way? That way. There he is on the side. Kevin Pelton with me to talk about the All-Star reserve selections. This is happening on Saturday, so you may be listening to this podcast after those selections have been made. I'm sure you'll get something out of it just based on what we're talking about with the All-Star starters, who we think should have made it, who didn't make it, who probably should have, who did make it, who probably shouldn't have, and who's going to be in that reserve group being picked on Saturday for the All-Star game, which is in like when is it? Like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, something like that? Oh, I think I muted Kevin.
Yeah, it'll be 2 weeks from Sunday. So
two weeks from Sunday, everyone in Las Vegas back in the All-Star game. So guys, let's just hit the starting points. Let's talk about the starters to the All-Star game. If you haven't seen them, I'll list them out, and it's okay if you forget these because we will be talking about them. The players that got voted into the All-Star game as starters are Jackie Young, Jewel Lloyd, Arike Ogunbowale, and Chelsea Gray. In the backcourt. In the front court, we have A'ja Wilson, Breanna Stewart, who are the two captains, as they were last year. Brittney Griner and Satu Sabally, Aaliyah Boston, and Nneka Ogwumike are round out the front court starters. So that's our starting group. Let's start with Kevin. Do you have any problems there? Do you think it was the right selections?
So I did have a vote. I was part of the media panel for the All-Star starter selections. The differences between my vote and my ballot and the actual starters, in the backcourt, I had Sabrina Ionescu over Arike Ogunbowale. And then in the front court, partially because of the fact that I tend to index a little more on kind of past track record of performance than performance over the first, in this case, like 10 games of the season. I did not have Satu and I did not have Aaliyah Boston. Instead, I had Elena Delle Donne and then Alyssa Thomas, who I think is pretty much the consensus biggest snub from the All-Star starters. I mean, to me, she's a tier ahead of even like the Delle Donne Griner group. And I did have Griner, which I think was maybe relatively rare. I guess she did finish among the top 6 in media voting, but certainly saw a lot of ballots that did not have her.
Yeah, Alyssa Thomas. I think did she set the triple-double record like this week? Like yep. in the last week, she's had more triple doubles than the vast majority of players in WNBA history.
I believe she had a triple double on Sunday, the day that the starters were announced, didn't she?
Yes. Richard, same question. Where were your issues? Are the same as Kevin's?
I mean, I thought there were 3 immediate picks in the guards with Jackie Young, Chelsea Gray, and then I had Jewel Lloyd as the third. And then the fourth one, I think you can make an argument for a whole bunch of people. My pick was Alysha Gray to go with those 3. But yeah, I do think there are a lot of people you could put in that 4th spot. In the front court, Wilson, Stewart, obviously, Alyssa Thomas should be in the group. I think there was just general incredulity when they announced them that she wasn't. I had to go with those 3, Delle Donne, like Kevin, Nneka, and I did have Boston in as well, leaving Griner out. You can certainly argue it the other way. Griner's minutes are significantly lower than most of her competition, which I think, if you're just looking for a tiebreak between people that are close, kind of just nudged her below the 6 starters for me.
Okay. I wanted to get back to a point on that and what Kevin said. Does it feel like this is even shorter time than we normally have to pick All-Stars? Because the season's now 40 games, so we're essentially picking it on a 4th of the season. Whereas, at least before, when you have your 10 games into the season, at least you're kind of like a third into the season when we had fewer games. Now it feels like we're right at the beginning of the season picking All-Stars based on a very, very small chunk of what's going to happen. Did you guys feel like it was a little bit more rushed this year?
I think the other thing that is a part of it is, and this didn't start this year, but when you move to the drafting teams format, the announcements get moved up a week because instead of the reserves being announced the week before, the announcement then is, the actual draft order. So yeah, that's a factor as well.
Interesting. Yeah, I didn't think about that.
And yeah, it did feel really early. And we've had this in previous years. Unlike Kevin, I tend to approach it on the grounds of it's this year's All-Star game. We should be using this year's games to pick the teams. So if someone has had the 10 best games of their life to start the season, then they're an All-Star in this year.
Yeah. I mean, and I don't think like part of this is, which tier these players are in. Like, obviously Satu Sabally is an all-star.
Yeah.
Like, she would have been one of my reserve picks. There's no question about it. Same with Aaliyah Boston. And they were in that pool of players I considered in the front court. One of the things I think is interesting, Richard alluded to it earlier. There's like a tier of 3 clear starting guards. And then the next group might be like 6 or 7 players, all of whom again are going to be all-stars, but it's just kind of the order in which you select them. In the front court, it felt like that cutoff overlapped, like, there were maybe 3 or 4 clear starters, and then the next 6 were probably in the same tier.
And so let me ask you guys, like, anybody in that starting group that may not have major reserves? No?
You mean in the starting group that was announced rather than...
Yeah.
Just looking at the list. No, I think they're all in. Maybe if you wanted to get really picky, I think some people might argue against Arike. Yeah. Just purely because she's a divisive kind of player on the grounds of her inefficiency and her ball hog tendencies, depending on how you view her. So I think some people might push her, but the numbers are so overwhelming in the end, even with the percentages being kind of off.
Well, I've always wondered, like, do we just get more of the Arike criticism because we're on Twitter and we're in the, no offense to any of us, the nerd verse of basketball, where we're kind of looking at this a little, because I feel like as a fan, I watch Arike, I'm like, she's awesome. Like, okay, yeah, she missed a lot of shots, but I don't care. The play is amazing. So I feel like we're kind of in the controversial aspect of her.
On entertainment value, she's definitely, absolutely. But yeah, if you start diving into the efficiency, then you can talk yourself out of it, I think.
I did not have her as a reserve when he did this exercise this time last year, but that to me was different this year. I mean, not only is the scoring volume higher, as Richard mentioned, the other thing is she hasn't been kicked out of any games, and that was, remember, a big factor in limiting her minutes and her value in the first half of last season.
She did kick a ball. I forget in which game.
I really got kicked out. Yes, that was against, I think was that against Seattle?
Either Seattle or LA. And she like just booted a ball, and then they of course kicked her out. She was incredulous, which I don't know, but she did it again in one of the games this year. I saw her. She was like tipping the ball to herself. I was like, "Don't do that. You're gonna get. You already got kicked out of a game for this. Don't do it again."
Well, just like the part of that didn't add up is like, okay, if you do this so often, why did it end up 20 rows into the stands if it was unintentional? Sorry, that argument did not hold water for me.
You're definitely not good enough at soccer to be on the level of where any touch is going to be in control. Okay, like you're a basketball player. You're great at that. Just stick to the basketball.
And there's a reason you're a basketball player and not playing soccer and heading to Australia for the World Cup in a month.
Well, okay, so that's on the starters. I mean, we don't have to get too into it. I think, like you guys mentioned, a lot of these players would have been in our reserves regardless. And I think we have some. We have the best players in the league coming to the game. It's just a matter of who got that nod first that week before, right? That little nod. And then
we should maybe discuss though the fact that like Aaliyah Boston is in this group as a rookie. Like,
okay,
it's remarkably impressive. It's not uncommon historically in the WNBA, but it's been a few years since we've had a rookie come in and play this well. I mean, maybe Sabrina would have done that in 2020 if she hadn't gotten hurt in the third game of the season, but. Nafisa Collier was maybe close to this level in 2019, but again, it's been a while since we've had a rookie come in and dominate like this right away.
Well, and to me, it's just. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Richard.
No, I was just going to say that on the eye test from watching the games, it feels like Boston and Alyssa Smith are both incredibly vital to Indiana and maybe on a fairly similar level. But then when you start looking into the numbers, the case for Boston starts to get overwhelming. She's unbelievably efficient when you look at the numbers. And any kind of advanced number loves her because of how those work out. So yeah, I think once people sort of started to look at the stats was probably where she started piling up votes. If anyone took even a cursory glance at the numbers before they filed their ballot.
Well, I think to Kevin's point about, Sabrina may have been there, right? Because of her reputation coming in. I think you do need that. You need the reputation coming in so people aren't saying, well, is it real? Is her play right now real? And that's why none of us are questioning it. I mean, to me, you said that, we should talk about it. I was like, oh, I guess we should. But to me, I was like, Aaliyah Boston is here because she's Aaliyah Boston. And she came in with that expectation of being this good. And she's been this good. And to me, and I'd like to get you guys' thoughts on this. I think her offense is a little bit more advanced than I thought it would have been coming in. Obviously she would have more spacing with the rules in the WNBA, but just for her to come in and be so comfortable, in the post, running an offense, rolling to the rim, in the short roll, her passing is getting so much better in the few games that she's played in the WNBA. I just think her offense has taken a huge leap. And that's kind of what put her over the top because, the defense has been there and you can see it on the court. Team just like to Richard's point, the team is different when she is on the floor defensively and then that offense came around. But are you guys surprised a little bit about her offensive production?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, this was a big source of debate. I was covering the opposite regional here in Seattle as opposed to the Greenville one. But, there was a lot of conversation among us as we were watching those games and eating, dinner before our games. Like, we know Aaliyah Boston's going to be a very good WNBA player, but is she going to be a great WNBA player? And I wrote about it prior to the draft that basically you can, pool NBA number one picks in the WNBA draft into two groups. There's the surefire superstars, the Stewie tier, let's say the Asia Wilson tier, which I guess Asia would be the last one who had this kind of impact right away as a rookie. And then there's kind of a tier of, good prospects, but maybe not surefire franchise players. And Boston, based on her stats, is a senior, at least at South Carolina, kind of straddled those two tiers, was right in between them. So you didn't know which direction she was going to go. And so far, it has been a hard turn toward the superstar tier.
I've been impressed by how much better she's already gotten from the first couple of games, where you could see the sort of the kind of thing we sometimes see with rookies where they can't get off the same shots that they could get off in college. So you could see her sort of turning into defenders and, there's still this 6'5" person directly in front of me and I can't get this shot off. So she'd have to come up with a counter or maybe a third move. And she's doing that already. It's taken 5 games for her to transition from these things she would quickly realize you can't do anymore. Now she's taken a step up in competition and she's already working out answers for these issues. So yeah, I've been impressed by that as much as anything, not just the immediate transition, but the level of improvement within 10, 15 games.
And the team has improved too. So it's you look at it, it's all of them, right? Team improved, she's improving. She came in, was what they thought. It's this is great. Hey, Indiana, what is time, guys? Who would have thought we'd be here this year already? We're already excited about Indiana.
But that's the thing. They need to not finish higher than 9th. Stop at 9th. They won't want to admit it, but you don't want to make the damn playoffs. It's a bad idea this soon.
I think. Well, go ahead, Kevin.
As someone who follows a team who has a chance of being in the lottery, watching the Chicago-Indiana race between 8th and 9th is this affects the lottery odds quite substantially for the other teams in it.
Chicago doesn't have their pick either. Great.
Nope.
Do we have someone solidly in the lottery who doesn't have their pick? Oh, Phoenix. Congrats.
No, Phoenix gave away their 2025 pick, not 2024. They do own it for next year. Yeah.
Okay. It's a swap, right?
Yeah, maybe. I'd have to check. They definitely don't own their own pick in 25.
There's a swap somewhere. I don't know if that was 25. But actually, while we're on Phoenix, we should also mention how remarkable it is that Brittney Griner is at a level that we can consider her an all-star, not based on the outside. She's an all-star just based on, mostly based on her play. And was away from the game for a year in a Russian prison camp, and she just comes back and has played, close to her normal level. And it's not showing up in wins. Phoenix is a flawed team, but her play has been phenomenal. I'm not stunned. I'm not like shocked, but it is just so cool. It's really cool to see.
It is showing up in how badly they lost in the games that she didn't play in the season where they were not competitive. Yeah, I mean, look, I admittedly was very skeptical coming into the season based on, some of the sort of third-hand reports that you were hearing about Griner's workouts and the fact that she didn't play in their first preseason game here in Seattle. And, it's like, basically, do we not want other teams to see where she's at in terms of her, getting back to form? And lo and behold, from opening night in LA in that highly anticipated game, she's looked like Brittney Griner the entire time. And yeah, I mean, I think that is incredibly awesome to say and worth celebrating.
Yeah, I think it just shows how much of her game is natural talent and just isn't going anywhere. And yeah, she hasn't needed to be in absolute peak condition to still be an incredibly effective player.
And it is kind of remarkable that you can spend that time away from the game and just come back. I mean, I just find that astonishing because this is a game that is not something you can just pick up. I mean, yeah, she has all that talent, but I don't know. It's one of the best stories in WNBA, along with Aaliyah Boston. Any other starter we want to single out here? Well, we have 2 starters on the wings, which is interesting considering their season's been a little bit more up and down. But any other starter we really want to focus in on?
I mean, should we talk about Sabally's development a little bit? I mean, this is someone who, I was really high on coming into that draft with UNESCO, her teammate at Oregon, had watched them play in person a ton covering the NCAA tournament. And then, injuries, some combination of that, the confusion about what role she was playing in Dallas, what position she was playing. I think, EuroLeague, probably we saw more of this from Satu Sabally, but in the WNBA, we hadn't gotten it for an extended stretch, and it's been awesome to see her make good on that potential this season.
Yeah, I think those of us who watch her play at Fenerbahce knew this was there, and it was just a matter of her actually staying healthy for more than a week when the WNBA season was on. And she's done it this year, and it's been reflected in what she's managed to produce. And she's going to end up getting a max contract at the end of the season from somebody, probably Dallas, but who knows?
Yeah, she still has to stay healthy for me going forward. I don't want.
Oh yeah, it's been like 12 games or whatever. So absolutely, yeah, it's not done yet.
Well, yeah, let's knock on wood. Everyone find some wood to knock on, because Sabally has been just a joy to watch it, and like Richard mentioned, like she has been at that level where we've been expecting it. We've been expecting it. It's just been those stop and starts with the injuries. So hopefully she stays healthy. But this is a great accomplishment for her to kind of show, hey, like that, it's all there as long as you can stay healthy and continue playing. So everyone,
and I was just going to add that Germany managed to qualify for the pre-Olympic qualifying tournament without her. So if she now joins up with Germany next year, there could be some absences, whether she's healthy or not, if she then decides to join the squad.
Oh yeah, we have the Olympics next year.
Next year, yeah.
Oh, so we're gonna take a break next year. Oh, interesting. Feels like just yesterday that we did that, because that was what, 2 years ago, 3 years? I don't even know. Yeah. It was shorter than it normally is. So yeah. Congrats to Germany. Way to go. We'll hopefully see Satu in the Olympics, but hopefully healthy. That's my biggest thing with her. Let's move on to reserves. Let's get into it. Let's start picking our players. Let's have just one of you guys pick one, and then, for the most part, I think you guys are going to agree on a lot of the players. So the way one of you guys just, Richard, start with your first reserve selection, and then we can talk about it, and we can see if Kevin has them too.
Do you want a guard or a front court?
Let's start with the backcourt. Well,
like I mentioned, Alicia Gray was my other starter. I don't know whether Kevin agrees had her in as a reserve.
I did, yeah. I mean, I thought she was, in that. Like I went through it specifically with the 3 backcourt players and the 4 wild cards is the coaches are instructed to vote. So
same here.
Gray was in that top 3 group for me, and the backcourt player that I had as a starter, Sabrina Ionescu, obviously was also among those selections. Richard, did you have her in that group?
She actually dropped down to being. She's in my All-Stars, but she's a wild card for me rather than one of the 3 reserves.
Okay, who do you have in that spot instead?
Yeah, Richard, just give us your reserves. This was dumb. Just give us your reserve backcourt.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, like we were saying at the start, it's a whole group of players who you can pick from. But my 3 reserves were Plum, Vandersloot, and Natasha Cloud.
Okay.
That's interesting because that's the first one. I do not have Natasha Cloud on my All-Star team at all. And
yeah, I'm not enormously surprised, but yeah.
And in fact, have a different backcourt player from the Washington Mystics.
That's the yeah. I think you could argue for any of the 3.
I think you can.
I mean, you look at the numbers, and it's incredibly similar for all 3 as well. Take your pick.
Kevin, who's your 3 reserves?
So I have Ionescu, Gray, and again, because of the fact that I base this more on track record than the first half, first quarter of the season, Kelsey Plum is the 3rd in that backcourt spot.
Okay, interesting. We have a little debate here. All right. Let's start with Cloud, because that seemed to percolate a little. So obviously, I'm in DC. I get to watch Natasha Cloud all the time. I think she is tremendously valuable to this team. I mean, you can see it when she goes out or she is out of a game. This offense, which is not great to start with, craters. They cannot live without her. Honestly,
I don't want to select Sykes as a point guard. I want to select her as a wing.
And Brittney Spikes have a great year, but like they cannot exist without Natasha Cloud. Offensively and then defensively, she is all first team for a reason. So Richard, I mean, I know I probably said some of the reasons why you picked her, but what were the biggest reasons for her?
Like you said, it's obviously she's one of the best defensive perimeter players in the league, but she's very much a leader for that team, which is the best defensive team in the league and is finally starting to show some signs on offense that they can do something. There are a lot of players very close to each other, and in the end, I went on gut feel as much as anything. Who do I want to pick? Because the numbers don't separate 3 from about 6 or 7. And yeah, I think it's the leadership. It's as much she drives that team more than Atkins or Sykes do, which was the only thing I had to split the group ultimately.
Yeah, I think in my case would be, look, if we're starting with defense, Natasha Cloud's a very good defender. Brittney Sykes is a better defender, and she's been a more efficient scorer this year. The most efficient of those 3 in the Washington perimeter trio that all have reasonable cases here. Atkins, you're probably leaning more on track record because she's gotten off to kind of a slow start before she broke out on Sunday against the Liberty with those career high 6 3-pointers. But Sykes has been right there with them offensively. I think if you're going to go Cloud, the case has probably got to be just playmaking is such a dramatic distinguisher between her and those other 2 guards.
And I'd say for Sykes, she's also been more efficient because she's playing with Cloud now. She's not being miscast as a point guard for now because still don't really have the backup situation figured out all that much in DC. But for now, she's being put in that 2-3 on the wing range, and that's exactly where she needs to be. She's able to fly around the ball a lot too because of the great defenders around them, and Shakira Austin has to be mentioned here just in terms of giving them a backstop. So it all plays together. I don't think you could go. I think the 3 of them. I think one of them needs to be on there. So I'm with you guys, and then it's just splitting hairs. Well, Kevin, you're going to say this later, but who do you have you have Brittney Sykes?
Yeah.
Okay. That's your.
I have her as one of my wild cards. She
Okay.
was kind of the last perimeter player I had in here. Richard, did you say, do you have Plum as one of your wild cards?
Yeah, Plum, Vandersloot, and Cloud are the 3 backup guards.
Okay. Oh, no, it's Gray, Vandersloot, and Cloud, right?
Yeah.
And then Plum is a
No,
wild
Gray
card.
Gray was the 4th starter, so
Richard didn't follow the rules.
Okay. I thought we were.
No, I think I did. What did I get wrong this year?
You put her in the starter.
The actual starters.
Oh yeah, because I'm still going off my list rather than the 3 reserves compared to the actual official starters. I'm going. I have Aaliyah Gray and Chelsea Gray both as starters on my group.
Wait,
okay.
Chelsea Gray you had Aaliyah Gray as a starter? Oh yeah. I guess that's right. Yeah, you did. Yeah.
Chelsea Gray's a starter. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So Aaliyah Gray is one of your starters rather than the reserve, but then your reserves are Plum, Vandersloot, and
Cloud.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have Plum. And Kevin, did you have Vandersloot?
She's one of my wild cards.
She's one of your wild cards. So yeah, this is kind of the thing you guys were talking about. It's just a huge mess here for the guards, and it seems like there's just a wild amount of ways you could go. So wait, let's get all of the rest of your guards. Kevin, tell me who you got in the wild card, just so we have that. I should make a graphic of some sort.
Yeah, we've mentioned them all.
Okay.
I have Vandersloot and Sykes is the 2 wild card guards.
Okay, Vandersloot, Sykes, and then
Plum. Gray and Plum. Yeah,
and Ezi Gray, Plum. Okay, Richard. I shudder to ask you this question because I'm not sure who you have in your starting lineup. But who you got? Just tell me all the guards you have on your All-Star team.
Okay. The 4 starters were Jackie Young, Chelsea Gray, Aaliyah Gray, and Jewel Lloyd.
Okay.
The 3 backups were Plum, Vandersloot, and Cloud.
Okay.
I have 3 wildcard guards in Ionescu, Ogunbowale, and Jordan Canada.
I figured you were going to have Jordan Canada. I mean, she's, got a really tremendous case based on this season's play. It's interesting because, and look, no one from the Storm has ever told me this, not even like indirectly. It felt like there was, when she left for a relatively low value offer from the Sparks, like a little frustration that she hadn't put in more work to develop offensively as a shooter. And first season in LA really kind of looked like more of the same from her Storm career. But whatever happened this offseason, whether it was Kurt Miller's arrival, the fact that she bumped down to a minimum contract when she re-signed, or a lower contract at least, she has transformed as a shooter and become such a threat there. And it's awesome to see, because I keep using the word awesome, because we knew that potential was there with everything else that she could do if she just had the shooting piece of the equation, and it has really opened up everything else for her. But she still didn't quite make my team.
I was about to say. And okay, so I find Jordan Canada might be one of the most interesting picks we have on this one. Richard, I know Kevin kind of defended it for you there, but do you want to offer your explanation there?
No, I mean, it's like Kevin's. I mean, pretty much everything else Jordan Canada's done since she came into the league has been good, except it's been undermined by the complete lack of a jump shot. The ball would get rotated around the perimeter to your open shooter in the corner, and then everything grinds to a halt because they don't want to take the shot. The same thing used to happen with Danielle Robinson. I was just going to say that, and she's not. It's not like she's turned into Steph Curry, but she's shooting league average on decent volume, and that's enough to finally let people vaguely respect it and to open up the rest of what she's doing in LA. And LA aren't great, but by the standards of what we've got in the league this season, they're solidly decent. They're a mid-level team, and she's a big part of that. Once you go past Necker, she's probably the next biggest part, because the rest of their squad has been bits and pieces and different players coming in and out and all sorts of other stuff. So she's been their constant after Necker.
Yeah, I mean, Lexi Brown has been really terrific when she has played. But yeah, I think that's a fair point.
And has that made it a little difficult? Obviously we know the guards, but like the splitting hairs aspect of this, I feel like it's easier when there's a little bit more separation among the teams, because this year you're looking at it, and okay, yeah, we have Vegas clearly separating themselves. New York looks like they're going to be good. Connecticut still dealing with the injury to Bree Jones, player we'll talk about later. And then Washington is good. We're pretty sure, We're like 83% sure Washington's going to be top 14. Then the rest of it's kind of just like up in the air. Did that make it really hard to split the hairs and kind of make those decisions within the same tier players?
No, because I don't look at that at all.
Okay, there you go, Kevin. Well, we appreciate it. Richard, you don't look at this either?
I don't really mind it. Again, it's a tiebreaker if you're, to a certain extent, if you can't pick between people. That some players are on teams that are dreadful and haven't managed to lift them from being dreadful. But then you've got players like Jewel Lloyd who are playing so well on awful teams that it goes past how bad the team is anyway. I did notice after I made my picks that there is one team I have no players from. One and only one.
Should we guess it? Kevin, do you want to guess it?
Well, it's not Phoenix, and it's not Indiana, and it's not... I mean, do you not have Nafisa Collier?
No? Well, we're going to get to that in a minute, but no, I have a Lynx.
Okay. Then, yeah, I guess... Oh, okay, I know it. Well, no, you have Alicia Gray, so I don't know what team it is.
Chicago?
Yeah,
Chicago. Oh, right, yes, I also do not have a Sky player.
So I did wonder whether to use that as a tiebreaker. To be honest, I have 21 players picked, and I was going to wait for you guys to convince me on my 22nd. Okay. So who knows? Maybe Chicago sneak in on the last. I was wondering whether to use that as a tiebreaker. Sort of, everyone gets a representation. Like, didn't they used to do that in baseball? Maybe they still do that in baseball.
Yeah, they do.
So this is interesting because, I mean, we can save this, but I had a Chicago player I spent a lot of time considering. It's not that Chicago player. It's not that Chicago player either. So I guess we'll see when we get there.
Okay. Yeah, I think I might know who the third one is as well.
Oh, I think I know where we're getting at.
Yeah.
Suspense for the listener. You guys probably know who we're talking about too. All right. Anybody else in the backcourt though that we want to highlight? Any particular players that you guys have points you want to mention about?
Ryan Howard was an interesting one to consider. I think the fact that Alicia Gray is there and is playing better than her playing a very similar role made it difficult. But the other thing I hadn't noticed until I went to look at this, Ryan Howard's steals have dropped by half since her rookie season. And I have no explanation for why that is. It was a big reason she was as valuable as she was, statistically as a rookie.
Yeah, I remember us having a discussion around Howard last year as well. Mm-hmm. And no one wanted to talk to me about my complaints that her shooting percentages were pretty poor that year. And I think the fact that it's continued this year, her field goal percentage is still shaky. And it's shown up by having Gray right next to her on the wing, producing similar numbers but better percentages. And yeah, so she didn't make it in. I mean, Indiana fans are also going to complain that Kelsey Mitchell, yet again, is good and producing numbers and probably not going to be an All-Star again.
Yep.
Has Kelsey made an All-Star team?
No.
No, I didn't realize she hadn't made it at all.
No, so I was just going back through it. She probably deserved to make one at some point, but yeah, it's tough when you're, kind of that player who's not the most efficient scorer, and you're not. And now for Ryan, like you guys mentioned, she's not the best player on her team necessarily. Like Alicia Gray's taking over that role, and Cheyenne Parker's playing really well too, which I think we're mentioning later. I hope we're mentioning later. But so I think I'm with you guys. I don't think she's an All-Star this year, and that's a little surprising given all the fanfare she had last year. Now here's a question: who got closest for you guys among the three players drafted last year? Shakira Austin, Ryan Howard, and Alyssa Smith. Who kind of got the closest to being an All-Star this year?
I think Ryan, just because I don't think the backcourt crop is as deep as the frontcourt crop.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were all on my long list, and then none of them made it. So maybe Austin, but yeah, I'm not. I think it was fairly close in that they were all just off the end.
And that's not that surprising for sophomores. So we're not we're not saying that they're bad. It's the point we're getting at. Great players, just didn't make the cut. Who else? Richard, did you have anyone you want to highlight among your backcourt selections or non-selections?
I mean, Kevin mentioned her. I think if Lexi Brown had continued her play from the opening 9 or 10 games and stayed healthy for the rest, then she might well have been on the end of these rosters. But when you have so many players that are so close, playing 9 games instead of 13 makes the difference, basically.
Okay. All right, then let's move on to the front court. Head on over there. Okay, we'll start with Richard. Tell me all of your front court players. Well,
okay.
Let's start with the starters. Let's just do it.
My starters were Wilson, Thomas, Stewart, Deladon, Necker, and Boston.
Okay.
They asked for 5 front court reserves, and I had Satu Sabally, as we mentioned, Griner, Nafisa Kalia, Brianna Jones, and Ezi Magbegor.
Okay. And then we'll get an injury replacement for Bree Jones, who suffered a torn Achilles. Huge bummer for everyone. We hope she gets better soon.
Yeah, and hopefully she gets selected by the coaches even with that, because she is clearly an all-star. So I had the same thing as Richard, where I picked her and planned an injury replacement.
And so who are your reserves, Kevin?
So my next tier, going off the actual starters, were Collier, Deladon, Thomas were no-brainers. Write them on in. Jones close to that. And then Ezi for me was kind of opposite. That decision came down to her, and I went with Dewana Bonner from Connecticut, who's ageless and having another great season for a Sun team that was the league's second best until Brianna Jones went down.
So Richard, give me the case here for Ezi. You can go use like general or aim it at Kevin and go after Dewana Bonner.
No,
which we've done on this podcast before. Sorry.
Bonner was certainly right on the fringe of my picks as well. To be honest, I was surprised by how good Ezi's numbers were when I started diving into it a bit more. The stats. Just from her play, from the Seattle's play, you see Lloyd show up so much, and then Ezi's kind of left in the background, and then but she's been efficient. The numbers are pretty decent. She's obviously effective for them defensively as well, although again, it's not a great defensive team overall. She is a rim protector. And yeah, it gave her the edge very, very slightly for me. But yeah, Bonner's a perfectly reasonable pick as well, as are 1 or 2 other players. We mentioned Cheyenne Parker, who was again right on the fringe. Yeah, I think we're splitting hairs again.
Should we go through the wild cards? Because obviously I have Ezi as one of my wild cards.
Do you have Bonner as one of your wild cards, Rich?
Well, no, like I said, I had 3 guard wild cards, which means, and I only picked 21 total. So the fourth wild card is still up in the air.
Have we seen Ezi Magbegor's on-off differential this season?
I did not look that up. No, is it especially good or especially terrible?
Oh, especially good. The Storm are minus 37 points per 100 possession with Ezi Magbegor.
Wow.
They're minus 34 without Joel Lloyd.
Jesus.
Well, I mean, they started the season with literally 2 post players that ever played, so that's not a huge surprise, to be honest.
I did not expect it to be that dramatic. I knew it was going to be good, but that she was not the reason the Storm struggled. But I didn't expect it to be that good, that bad, I guess.
They're also Jordan Horston plus 14 net rating.
Yeah.
There we go. Good. Also, his junk talent. Yeah. So good for Ezi for getting on Richard's team. So do you have any wild card front court players, Kevin? You have Ezi.
Oh.
Well, my wild card front court players are, so Ezi was kind of at the top of that list. Okay. The next one I think I'm going to guess Richard does not have was Candace Parker.
You are correct. I don't.
Yeah, as you know, look, I think Vegas is perfectly reasonable to select all 5 starters for this. As you mentioned, the fact that a 2-time MVP in your piece on Thursday, that a 2-time MVP is the weakest of their 5 starters is a pretty remarkable state of affairs for the Las Vegas Aces, and the reason they are off to the start that they are off to, but I think she still played well, and the track record couldn't be any better. So those were my two wild card front court players, and then is an injury replacement for Brionna Jones. That was the hardest selection for me. The Chicago player I considered was Alana Smith, who has been hyper efficient, huge shot blocking numbers. Like her wins above replacement player for me is like top 10 in the league, like that good. But still couldn't quite get there with her over Cheyenne Parker, who has been a bigger part of the Atlanta offense and also quite an efficient scorer as she always is, and then has the track record of being an all-star level contributor in the past.
Richard, I thought that's where we were going, Alana Smith, when we mentioned the Chicago frontcourt player. Who'd you think of?
I thought we were going to Elizabeth Williams and crediting the level of defense that she's offered, rather than it's hard to get there when you start looking at the stats because the counting numbers aren't there offensively. But yeah, I thought we were going with the defense.
I love Alana Smith. I mean, this Alana Smith, before when in the previous stops, seems like a completely different player in terms of how what's up
now that she finally gets to play for someone other than Sandy Brondello. Yeah, basically.
She played for Indiana for a second.
For about a week until they cut her. Yeah, they didn't like her, but being cut by Indiana isn't necessarily a bad thing.
It can come back in good ways for you. Might be a positive. But Alana Smith has been, and to me, shockingly good. Not that she's a bad player, obviously, but like I just didn't think she had that. She just didn't have that sort of defensive energy, effort, impact, all of that she has had in Chicago in other places. And I don't watch as much European basketball as perhaps I could, so I didn't know how she was doing in Europe. So I was really surprised when they signed her and brought her in, but she is like right there, and I think she totally deserves that that nod as a person you consider for that injury replacement. Now for Cheyenne Parker, last night had a big game, 23 points. It wasn't garbage time, but it was a half where they were down by 20 for the vast majority of it. Where was the impact for you in terms of, she is a big part of that offense. Is she effective? Is she efficient enough for you to say that, she's as good as these other players?
Yeah, I mean, I think lining them up head to head, it's not a dramatic difference. I mean, the fact that she's shooting 89% from the free throw line is a nice positive in that regard.
And Richard, who do you have for your injury replacement? Did you not have one?
I didn't pick one. I was just picking the All-Star. I'm not thinking about who would actually replace Jones.
Who's your extra player here?
Well, like I said, I was already looking for a 22nd. I think Cheyenne Parker would sneak in as well. She would certainly be my favorite C Parker this season.
It's amusing that I had two of the C Parkers. Is DeWanna Bonner the one front court player you had in your wild cards?
No, I didn't have any wild cards in the front court. I just had the three back courts
and the open spot.
Okay. Yeah, I think Candace is a bit of a reach this season. I don't think she's looked that. I think she's started to look old, basically, in Vegas. The legs don't necessarily seem to be under her, even when she's like playing on days rest. But obviously she's good enough when you're surrounded by the talent they've got there. And yeah, she's a perfectly good player to have as your fifth starter. But I would not have her as an all-star this year, but I would put her behind a fair few people. For other people that were on my list, Austin was there. We mentioned her. So was Smith. Natasha Howard in Dallas has had a solid season as well. And maybe the other person to mention who, at least at the start of the year, we would have expected to be in this discussion is Jonquel Jones, who the numbers aren't terrible in New York. They're just not what you'd expect from an MVP a couple of years ago and playing on a super team. But obviously she's come in not 100% healthy. And because they've got so many other weapons as well, they haven't needed to force feed her the ball when she's still been working back from the injury.
I mean, Like there was a lot of complaints in the wake of Sunday's game about her not getting enough touches, and I was like, I was there. I saw those touches. They went extremely poorly. She kept trying to post up into a brick wall and turning the ball over. Like, why? The point is, she needed more of those. And granted, she had a much better game, I think, on Tuesday than that game I happened to see. But yeah, I mean that's tough, especially someone who goes on track record. Like Jonquel Jones's track record is good as just about anyone in the league. So maybe I should have had her by my own criteria.
And it's interesting too, because I mean, these two players are in the similar spot. They are the player who's sacrificing the most among a super team, and so I thought that was really interesting how you guys kind of split the hairs between them to say, well, hey, Kevin wants Candace Parker there, and I just think it's interesting to see who's sacrificing and who is performing well in that the area. It's not easy to be that player on the super team. It's not. I think both of those players are going to have to learn how to sacrifice and work within a smaller role, and that's going to be hard. Although
Candace does so much else, like she doesn't need.
Absolutely.
And so she. I mean, I wouldn't read too much into this in this sample size, but she does have the best net rating on the Aces.
Oh, Richard. You look like you're good.
We're working with such small sample sizes, and net ratings are pretty a noisy stat where we're working with these kind of samples.
And the Aces in particular are playing so much garbage time that it's kind of who's out there with whom. But I mean, she's 16th in the league in wins above replacement player. Like her steal and block rates are still awesome. Offensively, not as much, but defensively, she has been a big contributor to Vegas' improvement at that.
And Vegas are a much better defensive team this year, and the main changes you see are Parker and Alicia Clark. So yeah, that's reasonable.
I think we should talk a little bit about Nafisa Collier, because I mean, at least on court side, we haven't talked enough about the Minnesota Lynx because, well, they haven't been that much fun to talk about. So I do want to give Collier a shout out because she's playing amazing basketball. So what made her an all-star for you guys?
I think whenever she's healthy, she's an all-star. Like so that's maybe the short answer. But she was right there in the conversation about the starters in the front court for me. She was very much part of that tier.
Yeah, I mean, it's a slightly smaller version of Lloyd in Seattle. Bad team, but a player who's playing incredibly well and largely carrying them because there's some help, but not nearly enough. So that's, the star player on the bad team that's still producing more than well enough to be an all-star.
Shouts to Nafisa. Let's hope you guys get some wins.
And again, a situation where the team is getting destroyed with her off the court, minus 20.5.
No. Some of these teams just need to get better. Teams near the bottom get a little better. Or actually, teams in the middle get a little bit better. I don't really care about the bottom. Just in the middle be a little bit better, so we get some good playoff series. Anybody else in your front court that you guys want to shout out, talk about, dive into?
I mean, Richard mentioned Alyssa Smith, so she was somebody else who I think came up in this conversation. But I think we pretty much touched on all of them.
All right. We do have like 10 minutes here. You guys want to do just a quick draft? We don't have to actually. Let's skip the draft. We'll save that. We'll leave that to the professionals in Wilson and Stewart. Guys, I think we can just wrap this up. I feel like I always go too long. Today, I think we just had a good show. Condensed. We talked about all of the players that we think should be all-stars. Well, at least that Richard and Kevin think are all-stars, and they are the experts around here, for my money at the very least. Richard, you can read on the Her Hoop Stats newsletter, herhoopstats@substack.com. Kevin, you are on ESPN. Anywhere else, anything else you want to plug before we head out?
That's primarily it. Certainly, we talk about the Storm on a regular basis on my Seattle sports podcast, but also a lot of not WNBA stuff, obviously.
Well, okay, yeah, Seattle sports. I thought it was Seattle basketball. I was like, are we just talking about bringing back the Sonics for 2 to 3 hours a day? Because I'm in. If you need that. if we're spitballing ideas to bring back the Sonics.
Not quite that long.
It feels like it would be a slightly monotonous podcast once you started to get onto like episode 3, 4, 5.
I'm sure there's a Bring Back the Sonics podcast where they just talk about bringing back the Sonics and figuring out how to do that. And hopefully that happens because we love the NBA.
I don't think we have to figure it out at this point. I think it's a matter of when, not if.
Yeah, they keep saying that. Well, hopefully. Richard, you have WNBA Dissected coming. Well, it's only 4th of July. I was about to say it's a holiday week, but I don't think y'all celebrate that one over there.
No, we don't have we got rid of America Day over here.
You should though. That's an amazing holiday. We traded America into Cap Space Day.
No, there was an article that came out today. The WNBA Dissected comes out every Thursday. So yeah, one came out today. So go look for it.
Go read these two guys. That will make you smarter about basketball. Follow them on Twitter. Our little Twitter things are right underneath us. And always subscribe, like, share the Her Hoop Stats podcast. We will talk to you guys very soon. Enjoy the All-Star break. And actually, we'll talk to you before then. So don't worry about it. See you soon.
Still enjoyed the All-Star break. Just we'll reiterate that later.
I'll tell you about it again.